Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My brothers and sisters, firstly, I need your help because I'm very, very tired. I'm not well. Yesterday I had to go to Leeds, then I came back to London, and then I've come back here. So I'm like really, really tired. I'm literally dying inside. I feel like I'm in an oven in this room, and I'm worried that I'm going to fall asleep. I've had like 2 Red Bulls, and I've run around the university trying to stay awake. So we need to make this as interactive as possible, and also have a time limit to discuss like 4 years of my life in about 15 to 20 minutes. So I need as much help as possible. So inshallah, I'm going to try and give as much energy. It's not because I'm crazy, it's because I really need to stay awake. So be supportive, inshallah. So firstly, my journey is very, very closely linked to the Quran. And because of that, Jazakallah khair. That's like Jannah, right? So, firstly, before I even begin, how many non-Muslims are in the audience? Okay. For yourselves, I'm going to stop using Arabic words. If I use an Arabic word, shout at me and say English, please. Okay? So instead of Ibrahim, I'm going to say Abraham. Things like that. Yeah, I want to make things as relevant and easy to digest for you as possible. So, for that sake, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh means, may God's peace, mercy and blessings be upon you. So, and this greeting is a greeting that's within all Abrahamic traditions. This Assalamu alaikum is a Semitic term, which is, if you put in Hebrew, Shalom alaikum. Yeah? And the Greek Orthodox Christians have a very similar term, but I've completely forgotten it. I apologize. But it sounds like alaikum, but they don't have a S sounding letter. They have like it's a P sound. It's out of my head, I'm really tired, I'm sorry. So, just for that purpose, this phrase is actually a purely Semitic phrase. It's within the Abrahamic traditions. Back to the point. So my story is directly linked to the Quran. And for that purpose, I want to tell my story in a Quranic way. What I mean by that is, when God, Allah, God, tells stories within the Quran, He tells them for a purpose. The Prophet Abraham and his story is mentioned several times in the Quran. But each time it's mentioned, a particular point or moral is being pushed. So likewise, when I tell my story, I don't want to give you a 20-minute biography just for you guys to hear a story. I want to give you something that you can walk away from today and benefit from. Something that you can say, I learned something today from this story. And that's my aim here today. Not so much to tell you a revert story, but to try and give you some lessons from my story. So my story begins at the age of 15. I come from a mixed race background. So my father's an Indian and he's Sikh, and my mother's an English Christian. I wasn't really brought up in either faith per se, but I experienced both. So I went to the church and I went to the good one. I was more of an agnostic in the sense of I believed in God, but I didn't have a particular religion and I didn't have a concept of God. Just a quick question. Is there any atheists in the room? So everyone's a theist. Yeah? Everyone believes in God and everyone has a religion. Yeah? I don't see any hands. Who believes in God? Okay. Who doesn't believe in God? So some people don't know. So those are the agnostics. So the reason why I say this is because I sympathize with atheists, agnostics, and theists. Because when people say God, it has certain connotations in the mind of an atheist and the mind of a theist. Yeah? People that have a religion don't just have a concept of God, they have a persona of God. Yeah? Whereas the agnostic just has a concept, something that we originate from. Now that makes more sense to an atheist, that there was some sort of beginning. It's not necessarily some being that is all knowledgeable, all powerful, has some sort of form, etc., right? Something, if you just said, God, if you even remove the label of God and just said, the beginning, yeah? The beginning of everything. That concept is much more digestible for an atheist and is somewhat agnostic, and it kind of leads into theism. I've completely forgotten what the point of me telling you this was, but there was a point originally, yeah? But it kind of gives some sort of underlying background between the differences of understanding, and perhaps, you know, when you're discussing with people of different understandings, it gives you a better understanding of how to address situations. A lot of people, when they're discussing proof of God arguments, an atheist is never going to understand certain parts of your religion because of this conceptual understanding. Anyway, back to my point, sorry. Okay, I need a volunteer. Someone put their hand up. Doesn't matter, brother or sister, volunteer please. Brother, when I go on a tangent, shout at me. Yeah? Say, get back to the point, please, yeah? This is your job. No more tangents. I have a short time period. So, back to the point. I was also really interested in science. I'm actually like a really weird character, yeah? So, I was like involved in a lot of crime, but I was also like a bit of a nerd in school at the same time. And I was like, I didn't really know where I was going in life. I started off as the nerd, went into the crime thing, and then suddenly became Muslim. Yeah? So, like, that's kind of what happened to me. So, I was that annoying kid in school that bunked all the classes but got A's anyway. Yeah? So, I was that annoying kid. Please forgive me, don't hate me. If there's any of those annoying kids, everyone gets annoyed with you, stop it. Go to class. So I was really interested in science. Now, around this time, something interesting happened. The atheist trend, which really kicked off, like it became cool to be atheist. The atheist movement really kicked off at that time. That's when Richard Dawkins released the book, The God Delusion. Does everyone know the book I'm talking about? Yeah. And that's when all these really big intellectuals started openly professing atheism, encouraging atheism, and atheism became a quote-unquote religion, yeah? In the sense of it's a belief system. It's the belief that you're choosing not to believe. That was problematic for me, because I always believed in God. And now, the very thing that I had a lot of passion about, religion, science, was suddenly saying, or some of the leading figures in science were saying, God doesn't exist. So you can understand the problems that I was having, the dilemma that I was having at the age of 15, quite problematic really. So I started looking into things. I watched this 3-hour lecture by Stephen Hawking, yeah? You know, the really famous scientist in the wheelchair? I watched a 3-hour lecture of his on the Big Bang. And it was getting really interesting. He was explaining the process by which our universe came into existence. And then he got to this point where he basically said, summarizing, these two atoms collided. And then he was like, but what happened before that? And then I was like on the edge of my seat with my laptop in front of me. And then he said nothing. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? How can you say all of that and then say it was nothing? And then it kind of came to me, then this is why I describe atheism as a religion. Because in essence, you can't scientifically prove God because you can't use your 5 senses to see God, touch God, etc., right? God's proved for another route. But you can't likewise disprove God. So atheism is exactly the same belief as, it's the same thing, it's just 50-50. You either believe there is no God or you believe there is a God. There is no backing because you can't prove or disprove God. So it's 50-50, there is no argument here. Both are faith. But for me, it was illogical that there could not be a God. If you look to the universe around us, everything is dependent upon something else. You know, we like, okay, I know that we eat vegetables and meat, but let's face it, brothers, we're all carnivores, yeah? It's just meat. Our meat that we need to survive needs vegetables. And the food chain goes on and on and on until it goes back to the sun. And likewise, the sun needs all of those elements that it's burning to exist. Everything is dependent upon something else. It's an endless cycle of dependence. And likewise, there's nothing in this universe that's unlimited. Everything is limited. So, for all of this to be sustained, or to have even existed, there must be something independent and unlimited. And that's kind of where I decided there is a God. But I don't like this understanding. I actually think this understanding is flawed. Because this understanding, it pushes, like I said, a concept of God. It doesn't prove God per se. What I like is what one of the classical Islamic theologians, Ibn Taymiyyah, he described as his explanation for who God is, or the existence of God. Ibn Taymiyyah says very simply, all you need to do is look around you. Look at things. That's why when Sister Jo was talking about the universe, I understand why people worship the universe. Because the universe, look at the Quran. What does the Quran say? Do you not reflect? Look around you and reflect. If you look to our earth and just think, it has signs and it links. This is why the first verse of the first chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening, states, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamd, all praise and every type of praise belongs or is due to Allah, God. Rabbul Alameen. Rabb is an interesting word. Because, you know, Rabb is originally Aramaic, and then it gets translated. When the Greeks translated the Aramaic Bible into Greek, they translated the word Rabb to mean father, right? That's actually not a bad translation. Because we translate Rabb into English as Lord. But obviously, when I say father, I don't mean biological, yeah? What I mean is the attributes of a father. That God sustains us. He has created us. He cares for us. He nurtures us. Those attributes are in a parent, right? And that's what Rabb means. That someone who is above us all, the king of us all, yet he nurtures us, grows us, and sustains us, and guides us. Alameen is the plural of the word island. An island is, tell me a motorway around here. Let's say, shout out a motorway. I told you I need interactiveness, come.
M1.
M1, that's the closest motorway. So, on the M1 you see these signs saying 50 miles to... Sorry?
70. 50 miles to Loughborough.
Okay, yeah. Etc. These are signs, right? Ilami means, is the plural of sign. Signs. So, what's the English translation? Shout out. When you open up an English translation of the Quran, how is Ilami translated?
Worlds.
Well, worlds, right? Okay. Rabbul Alameen means that Lord, that parent type figure who owns this world, that is a sign of his lordship. Do you understand? How powerful is the first verse of the Quran? And if you reflect on it, or me, you, this room, this world, this universe, if you reflect and link the signs and the signs, it all links back to God and is an evidence to his worthiness of that praise. An example here, one that my Sheikh Akram Nadwi gives, is how do you know because you can't prove God scientifically, right? So likewise, you can't prove love scientifically. But we know our mothers love us, right? How do you know your mum loves you? You look for what? The signs. That she cooks for you. She cares for you when you're sick. Mothers, you know, it doesn't matter how bad you've been in your life. They're always hoping that you come back. They're always caring for you. When you follow the signs, it points to what? Her love. And you have an obligation now to recognize her as your mother, to love her back, and to be a good child. Likewise, when you follow the signs, you have an obligation to recognize Allah, to recognize God, to love Him, and to be obedient and dutiful towards Him. This is the kind of mindset that I had that led me onto my journey of finding religion. How much time do I have so I can summarize?
You have 10 minutes.
I have 10 minutes and I haven't begun. So, I looked into a number of different religions, and there's no point going through them and ticking them off. I'll just say which religions I looked into, and I will briefly answer some things about them holistically. I looked into, firstly, the Egyptian religion, Judaism, and Hinduism. And then I looked into Buddhism, Christianity, and I left Islam last. And I'll explain why in a minute. Someone asked about paganism. Oh, there's a brother here. Someone asked about paganism. And I want to answer why because I actually really liked Hinduism. I saw in Hinduism there were some really interesting things. You know, a lot of Hindus actually don't even understand their religion, because Hindus actually believe in one God, right? They believe their one God is called Brahman. Yeah, not Brahma, Brahman. Brahman has 3 deities or 3 godheads that splits from him. Vishnu, Shiva, no, they're the same. No, they're not the same, sorry. Mine's gone black, so I told you type. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, yeah? They are all 3 entities that come from the one entity, and they believe that you can't worship God directly. That's where their kind of polytheism comes in. However, the original Hindus actually said, no, you worship God directly, but it's the less educated in their religion that introduce idolatry. And I kind of reinterpreted my own version of Hinduism. But what put me off Hinduism, the whole concept of idolatry, was a simple rule that is in the books of Aqidah, or the books of Islamic theology. And I'm just going to give you the example, it's very simple. If there were 2 gods at the beginning of the universe, God A and God B, God A wanted to build a tree or create a tree on this side, and God B said, no, I want a tree on this side. Which side is the tree going to be on? Who wins?
Nobody.
No. Either there's no tree, or one God will overpower the other God, and there will be a tree. In which case, let's say God A wins. Why would you worship God B? You should worship God A, right? The point is, our universe, our existence would be total chaos if there were multiple gods. Because ultimately, there can only be one ruling entity. There cannot be 2 unlimited intellectual super beings at one time, because there would be clashes. So that's why I did not turn towards paganism. Now, I want to stress 2 points in my last part of my talk, and I apologize for leaving them so late and having to summarize like this. The first is, why did I leave Islam last? Well, for 2 reasons. One, like I said, I come from a Punjabi Sikh background on my father's side, which means there was a lot of hatred and racism that was put into me from a young age. And second, this is the point that I want every single Muslim to take home today. When you commit sins, And when you don't follow your religion properly, just because you hide it from each other, doesn't mean the non-Muslims don't have eyes. Me then, see. And we see hypocrisy. The only Muslim friend I had was a drug dealer. Yeah? That was my only influence to Islam at the time. So do you understand? And we wonder sometimes why is it people used to become Muslim and now they don't, and why why are we so we disgrace ourselves. I'm not saying someone in this room is a drug dealer, but we need to fix up. We need to think, why is it that when the Sahaba, 80 years after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, blessings and peace be upon him, after his death, 80 years after his death, how is it that what is modern day Pakistan became Muslim? Only 80 years. The Sahaba did not speak Hindi, and the Indians did not speak Arabic, minus one or two on either side, because of trade, I'm sure some people learned. But how? It's because of good conduct in business. When people actually follow Islam, it will go a long way. And some people might say, oh, that was the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet. Well, Malaysia. Malaysia is roughly an 80 to 90% Muslim majority country. Do you know how they became Muslim?
Trade.
Yeah. Some Indians went to Malaysia, some Gujaratis went there, done some trade, and a couple of Malaysians were interested, and they converted to Islam. Islam spread through that country like wildfire, to the extent that they now bought Nu'man Ali Khan. Yeah, they own him now. He's their official sheikh in Malaysia. Yeah. Our character and conduct, if we actually work on ourselves to be better Muslims, we will see people more interested, and we will have better honor and izzah and respect, like we should. And before I move on to, how long do I have left?
4 minutes.
4 minutes.
This is in English.
It's honor. So, who's my Arabic guy? Are you my Arabic guy? No, he's my tangent guy. You're not doing a good job.
I couldn't identify when you're doing tangents.
But I'm not talking about the story, I'm talking about silly things. So, the final thing is, look, our character is very important. People, after we've done the basic aspects of Islam, the 5 pillars of Islam, the next thing we need to work on is our character. This is just as important, if not more important, than our sunnah. Our character is a big part of our religion. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him, had a Jewish neighbor who was a lady. Every day she used to chuck rubbish in the front of his house. One day the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I'm sure all the non-Muslims know what that means now, saw that she didn't chuck rubbish. So he asked about her and said, what happened to the lady? He found out she was ill. So he took some food and he visited her in the house. And she looked at him and said, why are you here? Like, I do this to you every single day. Why are you here? And then he said, this is Islam. And from that alone, she became Muslim. Our character and our failure to follow Islam is the reason why I left Islam last. Now, I have probably 2 minutes. So I want to stress my final point as quickly as possible. I read the Quran. That's how I became Muslim, from reading the Quran. And after a year and a half of reading the Quran, I was convinced. I believed in Allah and His messengers, and all of the 6 articles of Iman. But I didn't become Muslim. Why? Because this is what this is, for the non-Muslims in the room, this is what I'm describing now, is actually the definition of what the famous and dangerous word we all hear, kufr, means. It's when you have the truth and you bury it. It comes from the Arabic word, root letters, kaf, fa, ra, which is when a gardener or a farmer puts the seed below, sows the seed into the soil. It's hiding belief in your heart and rejecting it. That's what kufr actually means. And that's what I would describe myself at that time. Because of my own desires and my own stubbornness to follow my current way of life at that time was why I was not accepting Islam. I wanted to carry on doing the things I was doing. And my dear brothers and sisters, this is the final point I want you guys to take home. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Hashir in the Quran, have you not seen him that takes his own desires as his Lord? When we choose to disobey Islam and we choose to disobey what God has said, we put our own desires above God. When we choose, and this directly links to girlfriends and all of these things, when you see that you choose that person over God, you're putting your desire above God. You're making your desire your Lord. Why would you give yourself to anyone but God? I don't have much time to explain this point properly, but I want to give a very simple but silly analogy. There used to be this TV advert that said, where there was a little girl and her dad, and they're walking past a chip shop. And the dad says to the girl, his daughter, "Daddy or chips?" And this girl, she was very smart. She said, "Daddy, because he can buy me chips." Don't give yourself to the limited things in this world. Give yourself to the source of all of this world, and you'll never be disappointed. How many times have we set our hearts upon this life and become disappointed? But if you give yourself to God, and you give your heart holistically to God, you will never be disappointed. I apologize that I've given you a very mixed and random talk today, and I apologize if I haven't been able to deliver the points that I wanted. But Jazakumullah khair for listening to me, and I hope some benefit has come to you.
Thank you very much, Brother Ibrahim, for your talk. Apologies for the lack of time. The speakers outside Nottingham are in a bit of a rush because they have trains to catch. So we'll have a very quick Q&A session, and I'd just like to stress the importance of our lack of time. So this isn't an opportunity to have a discussion with the speaker. And
maybe if you let Brother Bilal do his talk, and then we can do our Q&A session together.
If that's what you prefer.
Are you okay with that, bro?
I mean your cab's going to.
Okay, then quick Q&A session.
Yeah, so just go over the first question. Oh, and please keep your questions related to the topic today, my journey to Islam.
Brother, maybe they can just shout.
So you're saying yourself, obviously aware of the background with India and all that, Sikhism and Islam and Hinduism. How did your family kind of take on board about you being Muslim, and how is it now, you being Muslim and being part of that family unit, obviously?
So, for the first 4 years, so I converted to Islam when I was 17. I'm 24 now. So, how many years is that? Who's good at maths? I'm really trying to calculate. 7 years. So, for the first 4 years, me and my dad didn't talk. My dad actually started fights, physical fights with me and things like that. My mother was very supportive. Initially, she was just worried that I was going to become like a monk in a forest and not have anything and all of those things. But when I kind of explained things to her, how life would be, she was okay. With my dad, it took a long time. And it was funny. About 2 to 3 Ramadans ago, my dad started a fight with me. And after that, so this was during the Ramadan, and then every single day in that itikaf, so itikaf is seclusion in the last 10 days of Ramadan, which is the month we will fast. Every single scholar that was there decided to talk about respecting parents. Every single day. And I'm sitting there, you know, this is 10 days I'm in a mosque, not seeing the air. And I'm just thinking, it's in my mind going back and forth, back and forth. And I just came to the realization, even though fundamentally I'm not in the wrong, I can handle situations better. I can deal with the situation better. So when I came back, I apologized to my dad. And I sat him down and I basically told him very clearly that, look, like, you know, I don't come home because of this. I stay away from you because of this. And I went for the emotional kind of card with him. And I basically said to him that, look, if me and you are ever going to speak again, we need to just agree to disagree. And we need to talk about the things we have in common, not the things that we have disagreements on. And from there, and with further discussion on that and working on that, me and my dad have a good relationship now. And they basically, like Sister Joe, they lost all hope when I got married. That was it. It's a done deal. So I hope that answers your question.
Do you have any more questions from the floor? No, nobody? Okay. So then I'd like to thank Brother Ibrahim for being here and speaking to us about his journey to Islam and taking time out to answer our questions for us. Please, big round of applause for Brother Ibrahim.